Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. We are chronicling the digital revolution that is sweeping the world here, and we are delighted today to have the CIO of Vari, which is a workplace innovation company, with us today. Jeff Dinard is the CIO there. They're doing some pretty wild things. They've got a terrific growth story, and we are delighted to have Jeff be with us. Jeff, welcome to Cloud Wars Live.
Well, thanks, Bob. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, Jeff, I love the workspace you're in there at Vari. It sort of reflects a lot of things that are going on at the company, but and it sounds like you've been in your working environment for some time. So bring us up to speed a little bit, Jeff. Tell us what sort of the last year has been like at Vari.
Sure. Well, thanks, Bob. It's a great question for us to start with, and not to make any assumptions. I'll just say very quickly that Vari was formerly Veridesk. So you may know us as the standing desk company, and you'll see that I'm actually standing. In 2012, we started as a B2C company selling our original sit-stand converter that sat on top of the desk directly to consumers. And we've been growing at a rapid pace, as you said. And since around 2017 or so, we've moved into a bit more of a B2B play as we've begun to outfit full offices for our fans out there. And so now it's far more than that original sit-stand converter. It's the standing desk, like which I'm standing right now, and standing conference tables and lighting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've also added soft seating and accessories and lots of other things to that. And I would also say quickly that most recently we've launched Vari Space, which is a new concept for us, and it's essentially a way for us to lease a fully furnished space to our fans with shorter-term leases and great amenities. So that was the 2-second version of who we are.
Yeah.
But you're right, 2020 is a really interesting story for us to tell. We were very, very privileged in that we were considered essential retail. So we were able to stay open when COVID hit in March of 2020. And we were considered essential retail because we were able to help our fans get set up to work from home, as now everybody has completely left the office and is now working from home. We were able to help folks do that. So we're very, very grateful. And now, I would say, I guess, ironically, we find ourselves in an interesting position in which many of our fans are starting to head back to the office. And so the pendulum is sort of swinging back in the other direction. And in fact, you'll notice that I'm standing in my office. And so we at Vari, we've actually been back to our HQ since June of 2020. So we sent everybody home in March and brought everybody back in June. And so really at the end of the day, it's really been just about trying to meet our fans where they need us to be. So it's been an interesting time for us to watch that pendulum swing from our original B2C to B2B, then back to B2C during the pandemic, and now back to B2B. So it's been an odd time for us, and 2021, as you can imagine, has just been a continuation of all of that.
Yeah, Jeff, I want to come back and go a little deeper with you on that B2B,
Yeah.
B2C, B2B, the pendulum there in the swing. But I couldn't help but notice that I think it is wonderful you refer to those people who buy and use your products as your fans.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we've done since our inception. And like any company, we have our core values, and of course other companies will tell you the same thing, and other companies will tell you that their core values are not just a handful of things written on the wall, but that they really live them. And that's debatable depending on the company, but I can say that for Vari, it's an absolute reality for us. And one of our core values is creating lifelong fans, right? And you could argue that it's our first core value, but we really truly live all of our core values, obviously, every day. But we certainly focus on creating lifelong fans, and we often joke and comment that we're all in sales, which I think you and everybody else will appreciate. At the end of the day, it's all about driving revenue and driving the business.
Jeff, that it's interesting because I guess there would be some people who'd say, office furniture, office environments, how could that be interesting? But I always had the idea that if somebody goes into a business thinking, well, my business isn't interesting or isn't cool, then it's not going to be interesting. It's not going to be cool. You're not going to have fans. You'll have customers or buyers or something there. So I really like how, you've said that's been a sort of a core part of the company since its founding. And if you get that sort of culture in there, it really opens up the space for what sort of opportunities you can have and what sort of relationships you can build with your fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you want to talk about culture and relationships and partnerships, um, this will be a 14-hour podcast. But obviously culture is incredibly important to everybody at Vari. And you know, and as I say, our core values are a cornerstone of who we are, but really it's our culture that drives us, and it's our culture that makes us who we are. We often say that, you know, your culture is your people, and it sounds like a little bit of a cliche, but it really isn't. And so we work incredibly hard, to not only hire and retain the best and the brightest, right, people that are better than me and smarter than me and faster than me, but we work so hard to make sure we're taking care of them at every step of the way.
Yeah, and over the past year, right, the companies that have been able to do that, not out of, in some ways, a sense of need, but rather that's just who we are. We adapt to the what's going on in the world around us. We can do it. I think they're the ones that are going to be most successful, right? Because that'll tighten that relationship and strengthen the culture rather than have it being something that people are wondering, like, well, gee, what are we going to behave like when things get back toward normal?
Absolutely.
So, Jeff, I would love to hear a little bit more from you about that, right? Because I think it would have been not very long ago that most companies, if they had had to make a switch over a few years from B2B to B2C, back to B2B, and, anywhere along that pendulum, they would have been kind of frazzled about it. You said it almost with a sense of like, another day. It's, what we have to. How did you do that?
You know, that's a fascinating question. You know, and I would say, fundamentally it's, and forgive me for repeating myself
Yeah.
already, but another one of our core values is embrace change.
Yeah.
So we've already touched on too, right? Creating lifelong fans and embracing change. And the reality is that it's part of our DNA, right? It's literally, I shouldn't say literally, figuratively, it's a part of our DNA at Vari. We're a company that's built, around this notion of flexibility, right? And we can talk about that from a fan's perspective. That is, um, you know, the cornerstone of our success in building flexible workspace solutions is literally that you can move the furniture with tremendous ease, right? I
Mhm.
won't move my camera, but I could easily show you that I'm surrounded by these walls. We call them quick flex walls, and they can be assembled and disassembled in minutes, literally, with no tools, literally, and you can move them. And so it's ironic that you're asking this particular week, because last weekend we did what we call an HQ flip, which means
Yeah.
we essentially took about 70% of the people in this building and moved them to a different part of the building. And we do that a few times a year. One, it you know, it keeps the place sort of fresh and exciting
Yeah.
and interesting. And two, it shows our fans who come through to do tours, it shows them that we put our money where our mouth is, and that,
Uh-huh.
you know, we're sort of, selling, for lack of a better word, we're selling you a flexible workspace solution. We do it too. We eat our own dog food, and we constantly move the furniture around. So I say all of that in sort of a preface to answering your question, which is, you know, when COVID hit, as I said, the company was founded on this B2C ecosystem or paradigm, right?
Mhm.
And then it starts to slowly shift organically to this B2C paradigm, in which our fans started asking, hey, you know, I really love your electric standing desk, man. Gosh, you know, golly, it would be cool if you had a standing conference table so that I could set up my whole entire office with your great desks. Man, it'd be cool if you had a standing conference table. Do you have any chairs? Like, man, you know, I'd love to build out a private office, for our CEO. It's too bad you don't have any walls, right? And so this is all happening very organically, where we're starting to really actively listen to our fans and deliver what they need, right? So when COVID hits, we're already living in this mind space where we need to be flexible, and we need to be nuanced, and we need to be nimble, and understand, not only what our fans want, but what the market needs and desires. So COVID hits, and we sort of all sat around and looked at each other and said, okay, well, everybody's at home, so let's just go back to selling everybody our products, because they work perfectly well in your home as well.
Mhm.
So now, you know, we have all these, corporate clients or these projects that are in the pipeline, and everybody said, time out, I'm going to hold on that. I sent all my people home, and we just sort of instinctively said, oh, okay, well, hey, let us know if you need anything for all of your people whom you just sent home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, right, I mean, I apologize for the long answer, but it happened really, sort of natively to who we are.
Yeah, and Jeff, maybe there's something right for a company that, uh, revises and, you know, pretty radically changes its headquarters settings a few times a year, right? You don't get locked into things. So it's like, I
Right.
just find today it's got to be a difficult environment for businesses today, where a lot of the leaders, put up the, oh no, no, we don't do that. Tables, yes. Chairs, no. Walls, no. This is the way we do things. And I understand there's got to be a continuity and companies have to focus on what they do, but it seems like those days of, this is what we do, and sort of like whatever people out there want, hey, that's their issue. So this more customer driven, consumer driven economy is taking hold. You've described, I think, how Vari is able now to, adapt to that and deal with it. But at a sort of at a technology level, did that present some unique challenges for the types of applications you run and how you sort of follow these relationships and demand forecasting and so forth? How did you roll all that together?
Well, I'll say quickly that I think there's sort of two parts to the answer, but I'll say quickly that that because Barry is relatively young, right? So we're eight-ish years old. Um, I'm happy to say that prior to my arrival, the teams had already implemented a pretty forward-thinking um, infrastructure. And so, because you're Bob at Cloud Wars, you'll laugh, but everything at Barry has been cloud since day one, right? There's
Mhm.
never been anything on-prem in this building or in our company, and everybody has laptops, and everybody had the ability. Ironically, when this is a funny story, which I won't tell you the whole thing, but I started in February of 2020, and I had a few weeks with the team, and then sent them all home. But on that day when we made the decision to send everybody home, we got everybody out of the office and set up in their houses in about 4 hours. And so again, it's sort of building your company with a mindset to always be flexible, right? And that's not just the furniture, obviously, but it's the technology as well. And so, um, we had some challenges along the way, but along the way during COVID year, right? But I would
Yeah.
say candidly, our challenges really weren't from a technology perspective. Our challenges were really challenges or tests that we faced. I guess I would say it was more about our teams having challenges at home and some fears and uncertainty in the world. And so we really pushed ourselves. This is getting back to the culture comment you made earlier, but we really pushed ourselves very hard to lean into our teams to ensure that we're being super sensitive to the things that might be going on in their lives at home. Now everyone's at home and grandparents are home, and so we tried to be super sensitive to that, loved ones, family, friends,
Yeah.
etc. And then from a cultural perspective, again, it's so important to us and it's such a huge part of who we are. Um, we really doubled down on culture during that time. And so, of course, in order to get everybody back, obviously, we implemented an exhaustive amount of safety protocols here in the building, which we could talk about at length. In order to get everyone back and alleviate those fears. But we also ensured that, as I say, we continue to double down on culture. So we have a cultural team here who didn't miss a beat with
Yeah.
any of the normal celebrations, um, holidays of all different cultures, and an annual lip sync battle, and which the photos and videos are pretty hilarious. And no, I'm not going to show you, but I'll just say I was Elton John, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Um, but and on a team level, I started sending out a weekly email to my team, and so we were able to just really double down on
Yeah.
culture. But you asked specifically about applications, and the company has been on a journey similarly over the past few years. In 2018, 2019, we launched Salesforce in a very, very big way. I mean, we bought essentially every Salesforce module that one can, right? And so again, all in the cloud, obviously. And so we've been slowly on this journey to position our teams to be able to really, really work effectively leveraging these enterprise applications in
Mhm.
ways that didn't before. Because you can imagine, and I know you've heard similar stories before, but um, Vari is still an emerging company on this explosive growth path, and only really launched in 2012, 2013, 2014. And so you can imagine that on an emerging company on that explosive growth trajectory, everything just happens really, really quickly, and there's not a lot of time to stop and pause and have the discipline to say, okay, well, we want to grow this brand, we should probably do Salesforce. Okay, we want to grow this brand, we should probably rethink our current ERP, right? things of that nature. And so the applications have been sort of morphing and changing over time, not due to the pandemic, but just due to the company's growth. I hope that is a fair answer.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. And I think it's very consistent with what you've described about this 8-year-old company that's growing fast and is willing to embrace change
Yeah,
as a, a competitive advantage instead of something, that causes you to be afraid and, stick your head under the pillow and just hope that the change will stop, because it's not going to stop, right? We
right.
know that. And Jeff, I want to, I know our friends at SAP introduced us, so I want to hear a little bit about what you're doing with them. But first, just give me a short break here for a word from our sponsor, BMC. BMC wants to know, is your business on its A game? That's when systems are intelligent by learning from markets, where automation is paramount yet effortless, and when technology and people work as one in an enterprise. The A game is your business at its absolute best. BMC calls this the autonomous digital enterprise. Find out more at bmc.com/agame. Uh, so, Jeff, it is, when we see companies today that are somehow able to look through this and say, okay, nobody could have dialed this up a year ago, but it's here. This is what happens. How then are we able to deal with this, right? How well focused are we, organized are we? How do we, I think, embrace this notion of change as something that's to be rewarded? Because I just get the sense, Jeff, we're not going to go back somehow to a time when business plans could endure for 3 years and you could have a 7-year model and it'd chunk along that way. I mean, there was a time when that worked, but those times are gone, right? The consumer driven, customer driven world, everybody wants new, different, customized, personalized things. So it's been fascinating to hear how your company's embracing that. And I'd love to hear you say a little bit more about that. I know you've had a big switch over to SAP and using S/4HANA. So if you could talk a little bit about that as well, Jeff, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually mentioned demand planning earlier. And so there's another interesting sort of COVID story to tell there. So as we launched 2020, the expectation was to continue on with an in-flight selection process for ERP, which was, as I say, in flight when I arrived. But the expectation was also to do a PLM, product lifecycle management, and TMS, transportation management system. So then that was the original plan for 2020, right? And as you and I have been discussing, everyone's plans changed. So we immediately stopped the selection process for ERP and PLM and TMS and just paused, which I think everybody in the universe did. But what was really fascinating for us as a brand is we're very closely knit, as you can imagine, and we all talk to each other. We're all fantastic partners. And one of my peers on the leadership team said she runs product, and she made an interesting, she leveraged that pause for great effect, I think. And she said, gosh, I think my demand planning and inventory teams are really, really struggling. It's really, our growth trajectory is so large and so rapid that they're starting to hemorrhage a little bit. May we take this opportunity while we're pausing to chat about maybe doing a demand planning platform? We landed on SAP's IBP, Integrated Business Planning, because we knew that at that point in time, we knew that SAP S/4HANA was the front runner for ERP. So we said there's tremendous synergy here. Why don't we use this pause time, about 16 weeks? Why don't we use this time while we're paused to finalize our ERP selection process, wrap that box, put a great big bow on it, make the final decisions, do any negotiations we need to do, et cetera. But while Jeff and my peer, the CFO, Craig, while we were wrapping up negotiations and getting to the finish line, we also had the teams implement SAP's IBP in a 16-week period at the end of last year. So again, our ability, forgive me for repeating myself, but our ability to flex and be nimble, and agile, right, as we call it on our team, has been really paramount to our success. So really, the answer to your question, I think, on the SAP story is it's an exhaustive story, and I'll truncate it for you. But really, as I said, there was a very lengthy selection process that was in flight when I arrived. in February of 2020. Again, a month prior to COVID, which is still hilarious to me. But so all the major players were considered, as you can imagine, and even including a full rebuild of our current ERP at the time, which would have been required. And just suffice it to say that implementation, the original implementation of our legacy ERP was flawed, right, resulting in a ton of customizations and scripts. So in the end, we did land on SAP, and again, very long story there, but I'll say that we did land on SAP from a functional perspective because we truly believed that SAP S/4HANA was the right functionality for our brand. But I have to say that to truly answer the question, the overarching question about SAP, I have to talk about the need for really, really rock solid partnerships and relationships in these types of initiatives, right? I actually recently said on another SAP panel that the relationships we build and maintain are the most important things in business, and I truly believe that. So with SAP, really, really, really early on in the process, and again, I was brand new to the brand, I built really, really strong relationships with the three major players with whom we were dealing at that time on the SAP side. And the power of those relationships was built on exactly, precisely the same foundation of all great relationships, which is that trust is built on authenticity, transparency, and communication, and we call that magnetic leadership, which is a completely separate 1-hour call that we'll do another day. But so anyway, so the functionality was obviously there, but really at the end of the day, it was the relationships and partnerships that made the most impact for us, and essentially made it easy for us to make the decision to go to SAP. Massive entity and so grotesquely expensive, and I think these are myths, right? I truly believe that the people at SAP, at least the people with whom I'm dealing, are the most down to earth and charming and caring and kind people who truly want what's best for me and for our business. And I would also say candidly, it's not grotesquely expensive. We were super relieved to find that we could make it work for our brand.
Oh, Jeff, that's a great story. And I think too, from how you've described your company from the outset, the importance you place on culture, trust, and we'll have to have, another 2-hour conversation on magnetic leadership, but there's plenty of alternatives and choices out there. So there's, had SAP not been able to mirror in some ways your culture, your ethos, your priorities, there's other places you could have gone. Jeff, I wanted to ask you too, because I know we got a few minutes left. You've been a CIO for a while in some different organizations, different industries. It's got to be pretty wild to see how the role of the CIO has changed. If I could give you just a bit of a preface, I've sort of followed the field for a while. It used to drive me nuts when CIOs would say, and I felt a little bit like, there was a hand up the back of a puppet saying, my job is to align IT so it supports the business. And there was something in that construct that said, I'm not a part of the business, right? I'm at the little kids table and, we're listening to the grownups at the big table. So could you talk a little bit about how your view of the CIO role has evolved and where is it today? Where's it headed?
Sure. So we have 6 more hours, correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. I'm just confirming. So I agree with you holistically. I don't know any other way to say it. I would say it's a tough question for me to answer because I will tell you candidly, I don't believe that the CIO's role, I'm only speaking for myself, but I don't believe that the CIO's role has changed.
Okay.
So and again, this is a day-long philosophical answer, so I'm going to give you the super high level, but I agree with what you intimated, which is that I truly believe that my role is a leader first, and a businessman second, and a technologist.
Yeah.
You might argue a distant third, right? And so again, I know you don't want the day-long answer, but I'll just say that at the end of the day, my job is to hire a team of servant leaders, and as I said before, servant leaders who are better than me, smarter than me, faster than me, and folks who want nothing more than to deliver excellence for the company without fail. And I was similarly, I would submit that it's not even my job to motivate them, right? It's my job to hire motivated people. And beyond that, I would say truly that my day-to-day job is to care for them. Um, and I say this very frequently, but it's my job to lead them with my heart and with love and
Yeah.
grace and care and empathy and compassion, which are very different things. And so by doing that, we're maintaining a culture of care in which people really want to be here.
Mhm.
And they deliver excellence, as I say, because they want to, not because they have to or because they need to. And so trust me when I tell you that this is not soft and fluffy. This is really the hard stuff. And so in my experience, the best CIOs are the ones who embrace this. They embrace what I say is the hard stuff, right? Because this is what drives results from the team, which supports the company's ability ultimately to serve our fans and drive revenue. So I agree with you that over the past few years, there's been this sort of, I'm trying to be careful what words I use, but there's been this sort of mantra, right, amongst CIOs that, that it's their job to be a liaison between the business and technology. And I agree with you. I don't think that that's actually correct. I think from my perspective, I am the business, right? I mean, as a part of Vari, we are all the business. There is no delineation. We may have different functional roles, but there isn't a need for a liaison if we all believe that we're here for the same reason. We're all here to drive revenue and drive our culture and create lifelong fans like we talked about earlier. And I would also say too, candidly, and I apologize if this is too long of an answer, but but at Vari, we're big fans of Patrick Lencioni, and Pat's a great friend of Vari, and Pat would also say that our jobs are not chief executive officer and for me chief information officer. That's not really your job.
Mhm.
Your job is really what Pat calls chief teamwork officer and chief clarity officer and chief reminding officer and chief communication officer and chief culture officer. I mean, I could go
Yeah.
on and on and on, right? But I think that oftentimes I think oftentimes CIOs find themselves to be technologists before businessmen and women, and I think there's an opportunity to rethink that.
Yeah, and you get up so close just on the technology thing, you don't have a chance to fully embrace those other parts of the role that you described. And Jeff, I know you've got lots going on there, so we need to wrap up. This has been fascinating, and I'm glad we have a 6-hour follow-up, a 14-hour follow-up, and a 2-hour follow-up. So we'll get those on the books.
Well, it's been my pleasure to join you, Bob, and I'm very you were an incredibly gracious host and tolerated my obscenely long answers. So
Not at
thank
all.
you.
Not at all. It's wonderful, Jeff. Really great to hear from you. And I think you got across the essence of what this remarkable company is, Vari, and what's going on there. So thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And to all of you who are with us here watching Cloud Wars Live, thanks for being part of it. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Jeff Dinard of Vari, and we look forward to seeing you next time.